So what happened? Were you bored in Manchester?
Was I bored? No, I wasn't bored. I'm never bored. That's the trouble with everybody. You're all so bored. You've had nature explained to you and you're bored with it. You've had the living body explained to you and you're bored with it. You've had the universe explained to you and you're bored with it. So now you just want cheap thrills and like plenty of them, and it doesn't matter how tawdry or vacuous they are, as long as it's new, as long as it's new, as long as it flashes and bleeps in 40 different colours.
This is the ray of sunshine that is Johnny from Mike Leigh's 1993 film, Naked. A deeply uncomfortable character study that explores nihilism and sadism on a biblical level. His characters were so vile at the heart of it, you'll be forgiven for not liking or enjoying the film. Hell, I don't even know if I like it. However, what is abundantly clear is it's not the film's intention to be liked. Its goal is to be a pure observer of a truly cynical, cold, selfish, utter turd of a man. And those are his nice qualities. If you haven't seen it, go out and track it down. It's a difficult film to get through, and is a fascinating representation of a time in British cinema that has kind of come and gone. And despite it being released more than 3 decades ago, is probably more relevant than ever with its depiction of what is essentially incel behaviour pre-internet age. There's even a character for all the wannabe Patrick Batemans out there. But instead of going into that, I want to focus on an element of the film that really struck me on first watch. It's a sequence of the film that I think gets to the heart of the film's ideas. I'd even go so far as to say it makes the main character of Johnny more sympathetic, if that's even possible. The scene I'm referring to is between Johnny and a lonely security guard called Brian. Prepare for heavy spoilers if you haven't seen this film, and a trigger warning that the film does delve into some pretty uncomfortable territory. But before I continue, welcome to the Curtain Call if this is your first time. I'm a dude, a mate, a bro, who loves talking about movies, television shows, and just celebrating the art of storytelling. So if you enjoy this video, please remember to pull across that curtain and expose that naked little like button and subscription button. Your support is really appreciated, and I love hearing from you guys. More to come, more to talk about. Can't wait. The scene in question is found slap bang in the middle of the film. Johnny has left his ex-girlfriend and her roommate alone after crashing into their lives and is left roaming the wet, oppressive streets of London. They're in the presence of a deeply disturbed, nihilistic individual, so the film takes that point of view. After involving himself in a toxic couple dynamic that Johnny aids in, he finds himself parked outside a corporate building that he brilliantly describes as a
Postmodernist gas chamber.
Seeking refuge in the cold with a copy of the Holy Bible. It looks pretty bleak for Johnny, until a police guard Brian sees him, towering over him. Clear visual motif of the differences of power. Johnny has little to hang on to while Brian is judge and executioner, deciding whether Johnny moves on or not. Now, so far in the film, Johnny and the audience have only been exposed to the more cynical side of humanity, so it was quite easy to expect Brian to remove Johnny from the premises, not only because it's his job to remove unwanted guests, but it's the expected response from authority figures.
You're all set to deploy the fatuous sarcasm. Well, I've beaten you to it.
However, what is a small respite from all the cynicism and darkness of this film? Brian turns to lend a helping hand by kindly offering a breath mint, a reminder through the dark veil that there is in fact goodness in this world. And what's interesting is Johnny is clearly confused as this act of kindness which just throws him into a loop. It goes against his complete distaste of people and his viewpoint for everyone being the same selfish turd. Like any cynic, when he accepts the mint, he then tries to overpower him by throwing away this kind gesture.
I don't want your pox in mint.
Which Brian relates to the phrase,
Waste not, want not.
referring that Johnny should accept what he is given, otherwise he'll be in the same miserable existence. Johnny, of course, scoffs and deems it a cliché, to which Brian goes,
A cliché is full of truth, otherwise it wouldn't be a cliché.
to which Johnny throws back, the nature of that very statement is in itself a cliché.
Brother, this guy stinks!
But this is what sparks the sequence that follows, which pits both Johnny and Brian into an existential discourse, and creates what is, in my opinion, the most poignant moment from the film. After being rejected by Johnny, Brian breaks the code of his responsibilities and allows Johnny to seek shelter in the building he's guarding. It's not made abundantly clear as to why Brian does this. It is certainly true the job he is tasked with is mind-numbingly boring, so it can be assumed that it is a way for Brian to connect with someone in a job that is normally isolating and lonely. But Johnny is still cautious. In the moment where Brian closes the blinds and repeats that Johnny can't be seen, I automatically felt that Brian was going to abuse Johnny, to which I think Johnny also feels. which prompts him to ask him to stop and tell him what's going on. But the truth is, Brian is just offering comfort to a person in need, and he goes very far out of his way to make sure he's still doing his job, just by hiding Johnny off camera and not allowing him to smoke.
You must be invisible.
What?
I must be seen.
Let's just have a look at who Brian is as a character. I think most will agree of all the people in this film, he's the one with the most screwed on head. He's certainly not a character to look up to, and he's certainly what people would deem a loser, but someone who is generally trying to do good and is actually trying to contribute something to society. Hopeless romantic who understands he's not at his prime and puts a lot of promise into the future. Something that really rubs Johnny the wrong way, which sees only value in the present, as the past is filled with regret and future spells doom for humanity. Brian is much more optimistic, however, explaining he values the tedious nature of his job, essentially guarding space and marking sensors to confirm his rounds around the place. A job that Johnny amusingly refers to as
Do have the most tedious job in England.
But Brian sees the job as a time to reflect, grow and educate himself. Being the manipulative, cynic Johnny is, however, he sees it as an opportunity to break down Brian's philosophy, giving him his brutal truth, which sadly works to break down the confidence of Brian by questioning and opening him up about his mundane existence, his lack of a sex life, his general loneliness, and a lack of achievement.
It's funny being inside, isn't it? Because when you are inside, you're still actually outside, aren't you? And then you can say when you're outside, you're inside because you're always inside your head.
Something that Brian can't ultimately disagree with, he hangs on to the hopes of freedom for the future, the never too late mindset. Johnny becomes brutally honest with Brian as he proceeds to break down the pointless job he has been entrusted with, patronising and certainly ironic since Johnny has never held a job before.
Not train a tall chimpanzee to do that, or a small chimpanzee with a bigger gizmo.
Johnny is trying to impart some truth to Brian as well. Brian certainly doesn't look joyful taking Johnny around. Comes off as more desperately showing Johnny around the world he has become all too familiar with. He's a lad who has purpose only while everyone is sleeping, and whose work goes generally unnoticed by the general public, and now finally has the opportunity to share his expertise.
My existence at this moment on this spot is now trapped and recorded.
It certainly rings a bit more truth than I think he meant. But Brian is honest and is willing to defend himself, having to convince Johnny that he's not a boring person.
Instead, it gives me time and space to contemplate the future at my leisure, whilst the city sleeps. So you see, it's not a boring job. And I'm not boring either.
Which is where we get our lovely and heartwarming protagonist to have a philosophical argument with the lonely guard. They end up arguing about what is better, living in the moment or planning for the future. Two individuals, two minds who have completely opposite views on the future. If it hasn't already been made clear, Johnny has basically given up on the future, living every day like the next. He believes people are looking too far into the future for hope and are fighting an impossible battle in thinking they can change the course of their future. As Johnny relates, we are constantly kicked up the arse by the future every moment.
Because the present is the future and the future is the past, and it's all the same bag of bones anyway. It's a constant process of coming into being and passing away, coming into being and passing away. The future is now.
Sure, every act we commit is to get a result in the future, but the reality of our existences is we often lose ourselves to the dreams of either the past or the future to really change our circumstances. Brian holds on to the belief that he's not in the present though, but he's the future every second on, a second closer to his dreams fulfilled.
But I'm not in the present. I'm in the future. Exactly.
A hopeful mindset, sure, but possibly a little too optimistic and comfortable to be making progressive headway. Sure, every act we commit is to get a result in the future, but the reality of our existences is we often lose ourselves to the dreams of either the past or the future to really change our circumstances. While Johnny is certainly right that humanity does focus a lot of time thinking of what will be instead of what is, he has little faith in the human race's accomplishments, and generally believes there's little necessity for it because humanity's future has already been made clear.
I wouldn't even mind, but you don't even have a future. I don't have a future. Nobody has a future. The party's over. Take a look around you, man. It's all breaking up.
This gets Johnny pretty worked up in the uncut shot of Johnny and Brian in silhouette. He explains that the commodification of goods through barcodes and the push for a cashless society is evidence to him of the biblical end of humanity found in the book of Revelations. Remember, Johnny is a man of faith despite acting very much against the teachings of the Bible. But I think he justifies his cruel actions by admitting he has faith. He blatantly comes out and admits God is out to get us through pain, hate, greed and war. So why bother worrying? I certainly see some truth in his opinions on human evolution, and that in order to grow as a species, we will need to adapt to another state of being. However, Johnny is also brutally nihilistic and hypocritical, generally trying to come off as the most read and intelligent person in the room. But he actually has little concept or care for his current predicament. It's certainly clear to me that these views that Johnny holds justify his bohemian lifestyle, so he doesn't need to find a job or find a calling to anything in life. To him, he's been given the raw deal in being given life, and is only obligated to poke fun at it while everyone else gets worked up about it. Hence why he values human life so contemptibly. However, as he speaks about doing better than everyone or being more enlightened, he too succumbs to his basic human urges like everyone else, of lusting over a woman across the street.
Good looking young girl, isn't she?
She's right.
Something that he shares along with Brian, the lonely security guard. However, the difference between Brian's way of thinking and his is Johnny is willing to act. Brian sits in fear, not knowing what to say and fearing rejection. Johnny has no care for it, as he has nothing to lose and goes over to see the woman. However, it's made clear that this confidence that Johnny has and is purely to poke fun and intimidate the woman, who turns out to be abusing herself with alcohol, leading to a pretty uncomfortable scene, reminding us that despite thinking he has it all worked out, he's probably the most timid and weak person in the room, finding satisfaction from the pain of others. Further proven by him returning to the cold streets of London once he's done with her, and looking to grab breakfast with Brian once he finishes his night shift. What's interesting though is Brian embarks one final piece of advice to Johnny, one that I'm not sure Johnny is capable of taking on.
Don't waste your life.
Following the scene, it's hard to say that Johnny will follow this advice, as he does continue further down his quest of abusing others. It's purely hope that Johnny will finally let that sink in and actually change his life for the better.